I'm sick of hearing about morning routines, and I've long been advocating for liberating yourself from strict routines and schedules if that's something that just doesn't work for you. I've made video after video about releasing the 9 to 5 and accepting that productivity comes in all different shapes and sizes, and I can be more productive while out for a walk and thinking through a problem in a loose and unstructured way than I am sitting at a screen staring at it. But here's the truth that I keep hitting up against. If I don't keep bringing myself back to a schedule, a routine, ticking things off, using a diary, getting up at the same time every day, and yes, having a morning routine, everything just starts to fall apart. I start to lose a sense of control over my life. I start to lose sight of the important things that actually should be getting done on a day-to-day, week-by-week basis. And the whole cycle is just absolutely not sustainable. I'm making this video today not because I have finally figured all of this out and I'm no longer facing this problem and I'm a productivity machine who gets up at the same time every day, has a absolutely solid morning routine, has their weekly schedule down pat and is just excelling at life. Unfortunately, I'm very much still in the middle of figuring this out, and right now I am not in a good wake up routine at all. I am not waking up at a consistent time. I don't have any sort of routine in the mornings whatsoever, apart from eating something and getting some coffee into me in order to make myself feel human. The reason I'm making this video right now is that even though I am in a relatively bad phase in terms of my routine and my productivity, I have not lost hope. I haven't spiraled into despair in the way that I used to. I no longer feel as though I am absolutely doomed to be in this phase forever, that I'm never going to get anything done, that I'm never going to be a productive adult and productive human being. Instead, I've started to learn over the last year what does and what doesn't work for me in terms of getting myself back on track, that there are phases and that even the best routines and schedules for me will eventually fail. I will eventually find myself slipping out of them, but at the end of the day I know I have learned myself the things that help pull me back out of this. So I'm always aware that even though finding the motivation sometimes to apply those techniques, to apply those habits consistently enough to see a good month, a good 3 months, a good 6 months, even though I know it can be hard to actually have the get up and go to follow what needs to be followed, at least I know what I need to be aiming for. At least I know the things to try and the things not to bother with, and roughly I have a map out of the situation that I'm in right now. The main thing that I've learned is that I need to have a balance between routine and structure, and having permission at all times to let go of that routine and structure when the time calls for it. So I absolutely need to have a pre-made structure that I know works for me, that I don't have to reinvent the wheel each time. And part of this feeling of not having to reinvent the wheel is having faith that because something worked for me once in the past, that it will actually work for me in the future, and also that just because I have failed and fallen off the wagon, that doesn't mean that entire routine or idea needs to be thrown out the window and I need to start from scratch again. I think this comes along with being able to throw out the routine if necessary. So for example, if I am having a very tough week and I've had a lot of deadlines, maybe I've had a large number of clients or a creative project that has been pressing on me because it has a specific deadline, I will sometimes look at my routine and say, okay, I'm not supposed to be taking Thursday off, but I'm exhausted. I'm starting to feel that sense of burnout, and I'm just going to take the day off. Or if I wake up in the morning feeling really, really burnt out and exhausted, instead of fueling myself with more coffee, pushing myself to keep going and facing potentially into weeks of burnout, I'm going to take the day off. I'm going to do nothing. I'm going to sit on the couch. I'm going to allow myself that day. Similarly, I sometimes need to allow myself to focus on a creative project. This is really crucial. I'm starting to realize that I need to allow myself to prioritize things in my life that I value, that I think are important to me, that are things that I want to achieve over the long-term scope of my life, that don't necessarily fit into my current career plan, my business plan, applying for jobs or anything like that. There come times when, for example, I might be applying for a competition or just have a spark of inspiration and something that I want to explore creatively, and I have to just give myself permission to really focus my week or my month on that idea. What I've been trying to do more recently is to have an extremely scaled back version of my weekly chores and to-do lists, to have, for example, video ideas that are easier to make, that are going to require less planning and less editing for weeks when I really just don't have the time to spend a full day on a YouTube video. I have an idea in my head for the optimal amount of times that I want to be posting on social media, for example, for the optimal amount of time that I want to be sinking into my business and business planning, and I'm working on that side of things. And then I have a scaled back version. I have a bare minimum version. I'm still working on that. It's still a work in progress in my head. But my idea is that if I don't have that scaled back version, if I don't have a bare minimum version that is really only going to take a couple of hours of work per week, I then don't have the freedom to just drop the 90% extra and focus in on this creative project, or maybe it's something social, maybe something in my life is just bubbling up that needs to be addressed. I don't have the freedom to focus on that, or because I don't have the freedom, I might just rebel. I might just throw absolutely everything out the window and ignore everything for a week, and then end up feeling panicky after a week or two when I realise that I've let a lot of things slide. Of course, most people aren't going to have this level of freedom, and I'm not always going to have this level of freedom in my life either, to only spend an hour or two a day on my primary work tasks. But to be completely honest, the entire reason that I'm working on self-employment, the entire reason that I decided to go down this self-made path in terms of my work life, my career, is because I want to have that freedom, because I want to be able to self-direct and follow up on creative instincts and take out time to work on especially fiction and things like that when the time is right, when it's important for me to do so. So I'm expecting as time goes on that my bare minimum is going to look busier and busier, and we'll have more clients, and I will just have more of a workload that needs to be worked through no matter what. But that's something that I'm going to have to readdress later on. And what I'm expecting is I might reach a point where I have maybe a month, a year at least, that I take away from the business in order to work on other projects, for example. It might need to be fit in different ways. But I do think that no matter what your life looks like, this is a lesson that can be learned as well. You might want to look at all the different areas in your free time and where you put in time and what you think the bare minimum is in all of those categories, and have a structure in your head for when you feel like, okay, this week either I need some duvet time, I need to sit on the couch a lot, or that you have a project that you really need to dig your teeth into, that you will have a strategy in mind so that you don't end up with that overwhelm of the dishes piling up in the sink, of feeling like maybe your partner becomes completely neglected, maybe you miss out on social events because you're so overwhelmed that you just keep turning things down or not replying to texts on your phone. This is what I would recommend. Like I say, I'm still working on it, so I don't know if it's a foolproof strategy, but having that idea of bare minimum, having a plan for that, and to say to yourself, okay, instead of spending an hour cleaning today, I'm going to spend 10 minutes. And then I'm going to use the rest of that time to start painting that picture, to start writing that novel, to start writing that application for a different job, or for a PhD or a master's degree, or whatever it is that you feel you need to be working on. Closely related to this is an idea that I have started to try to adopt, and it might fly in the face of what you find works for you or what other people have advised at certain times. Your mileage absolutely may vary, and this is something that you kind of have to figure out for yourself. I find that my instinct is to batch tasks. My instinct is that unless I have a 3 or 4 hour window to hone in on something, to absolutely smash it, to really get focused and dig into it, that then there's no point in even trying, and that the thing needs to be done right. It needs to be done properly. And for some people this works, for some people they find it easier, and perhaps it is. You probably do better deep work if you're doing this, if you're actually giving yourself big batches of time to dig in and focus on. But I find that the vast majority of things in life don't require this level of depth. It's very satisfying when you can do it. And I do think that when you're in phases of being very productive, of being very high energy, you will probably find yourself doing this kind of thing more, right? So you will find that you lose yourself in something that you're working on. You will find that you feel energetic enough to spend hours with friends or hanging out without looking at your watch and thinking it's time to go to bed. You will find that you start into one cleaning task and you end up doing a deep clean of the entire room. All of these things will happen organically, I think, when you have more energy. But I find for me personally that expecting myself to do that all of the time, it sets me up for failure, and I find it much more satisfying actually in a general sense on a day-to-day basis to be able to tick off multiple tasks in one day rather than being ticking off huge mammoth tasks that have been addressed in a week. This is so crucial for me when I am pulling myself out of a phase of burnout, lack of productivity and low energy. It's so important for me to have a list of manageable tasks, manageable things that I can spend half an hour or less working on in the day and be able to tick that off in my diary. Yes, I will have something during that week that I also want to be doing a deeper dive into, most likely, but that is what I really need to focus on. And I think there's something deeply psychological about this, that if you can feel that you have achieved something in the day, no matter how small, the more of that you can rack up, the more positive you feel about yourself, the more confidence that you're going to gain, and the more you're going to feel capable of actually tackling bigger tasks that are going to take longer. So that is one of my biggest tricks for getting back into a productive mindset. It is pretty common for people to advise to break a mammoth task into manageable chunks, actionable tasks, and absolutely I do back that up as well. I absolutely stand behind that. But I think sometimes before you can even start into trying to break your mammoth task into those actionable tasks, sometimes you need to build up a certain amount of confidence, a certain amount of momentum in yourself. And so having those small tasks that can be ticked off relatively easily, having that little list of your daily tasks that you do that you can say, yes, I've done that, I've done that, I've done that, great. For me personally anyway, I find that to work really well. I'm going to get into a few more specifics now for what works personally for me in terms of organising my life and getting myself out of a funk. I've deliberately started with the broader picture things because I think that might be more generally applicable to more people. Once I get into more specifics, like I say, your mileage will vary, everyone's different, but I'm hoping that somebody might find some of these helpful. Almost all of these have a caveat. So, for example, my first thing is that the most crucial intervention that I can make in my life is to get up at a decent early-ish hour every single day, to set an alarm and have that non-negotiable and just drag myself out of bed. And I will probably have a few days in the beginning of feeling very sluggish in the morning, of regretting my decisions, of thinking I could have just slept in for longer and, started work a bit late or just not bothered doing any exercise this morning, drag myself straight to my desk. But I think if you're interested in self-development, self-improvement at all, then you definitely are aware that sleep is absolutely based on routine, and one of the most important things you can do for yourself is to get into a good sleep routine. And if you've gotten out of that sleep routine, getting rigid about it is going to be helpful to you. My caveat is that I find that sometimes if I'm very run down, especially if I'm very physically run down, I need to be a little bit more flexible with myself on that, because if I am wide awake at 1 a.m. and I know I have an alarm clock set for 7:30, I can start to get very anxious because I start to feel like, oh, well, I'm never going to get enough sleep. I'm so tired. I've already been so tired this week. And then it just keeps me up. It keeps me awake. And I spiral into a negative thought pattern. So sometimes I need to give myself a bit more flexibility and say to myself, well, as long as I'm at the desk by 9:30, or as long as I put in this amount of hours into this task tomorrow, then that will be a productive day. So I know that's very contradictory for me to say. On the one hand, the main thing that helps me is getting up at the same time every day and implementing that and enforcing that. But then on the other hand, but that is, as I've said, that has been for me, I've needed to learn to balance these two approaches and to recognize when one is working and when one isn't. So if I'm continuing to feel really burned out and run down after a period of time of attempting to get myself up at the same time every day, of attempting to run my morning routine regularly, to do all of the things on that list, which I'll get into in a minute. If that hasn't been working for me for a while and I'm still just really feeling dreadful, then I decide, right, it's time for plan B. It's time to be a little bit more gentle. It's time to allow myself to maybe sit on the couch in the morning for a while to drink my coffee instead of going straight to my desk. It's time to be a bit more gentle with myself, like I say, and give myself a little bit of leeway. And again, there will be times when I've been doing that for a few days, weeks, maybe even months, and I'm aware that actually what I need right now is a bit of tough love, and it's time to just cut the bullshit and start actually getting up at 7:30 like I said I would. The next thing is the dreaded morning routine. I say dreaded because I feel like this got very overdone between about 2014, 2018, around that period of time. Everyone and their mothers were talking about their morning routine. It was really posited as being the be-all and end-all of productivity and of feeling good, and even in the spiritual community as well, of setting yourself up right spiritually every morning. And the problem is they're not wrong. The problem is that this is rooted in reality, and honestly, morning routines, they are really important, but always the caveat. My problem was that, again, I would let myself get too rigid with it, and if I wasn't managing to achieve all of the things on my list of my morning routine, I was most likely to chuck the whole thing out, rather than accept that maybe one or two things could be let slide. I got it into my head that if I didn't do something first thing in the morning, that it just wouldn't happen. And I therefore started to create this more and more elaborate morning routine that ended up being about 3 hours or 3.5 hours long at its craziest incarnation. This might sound a bit wacky, and to be honest, to some degree it really was. I mean, it's not as though we can only do things in the first 3 or 4 hours of our 16-hour day and are liable to just sit on the couch and do nothing after those first few hours have passed. What I was picking up on in myself, I think, was that all of those seemingly non-essential tasks and hobbies and habits that I wanted to cultivate in myself, those were the things that if I didn't do them before work, that I just wouldn't find the time to do later on in the evening, partly because I would be tired, partly because I might get an invite to go and do something social, because chores and cooking dinner and things like that would take over. And I know that this is something that a lot of people feel as well. A lot of people get up really early in the morning and talk about their morning routines for this exact reason. This idea that you make those early hours sacred and then you burn yourself out with the rest of your work the rest of the day. And make sure that you have those important tasks done at the beginning so that you can't talk yourself out of doing them later on. For me personally, I'm looking back in that period of my life now and I'm thinking, right, but why was it that I was getting so burned out and so disheartened by the rest of my day? Because I wasn't working a paid job that I didn't have the option of leaving. I was doing a PhD, for example, or a master's degree during those years. I was doing something that I had chosen to do. I could probably psychologize myself all day around that thorny issue of why doing a PhD didn't suit me very well. But it does make me think that probably what needed to be adjusted was not so much my morning routine and how many different things I was getting done in the morning versus later on, but how I was approaching my workday, how I was approaching my work, how I was thinking about that, how I was beating myself up for not being able to immediately make progress with something, for needing breaks, for all sorts of different things like that. And I do honestly think that anybody who's in that situation where they feel panicky about having to fit absolutely everything into the morning first thing probably does, if they have the freedom to, maybe need to look at their lives more generally and think, well, why? Why is it that if I get to a certain point in the day and I haven't done these things and I'm very unlikely to do them, is it because I am actually working a job that is soul destroying and maybe I need to try and find an exit strategy? Is it because actually maybe there are things that are in that morning routine that you're telling yourself that you should want to do, but that you actually don't really truly want to do, that actually are really truly not part of your priority? Perhaps there are other things that are more pressing on your mind that you feel like you want to be doing and they're not on your list. You haven't added them to this schedule whatsoever, and maybe on some level you may be feeling resentful that you are throwing all of this time and energy into all of these different tasks but not really getting anywhere with the things that are really important to you. Obviously many people don't have the freedom to change up a life that looks like this. Many people don't have the freedom to leave their very stressful jobs, or the stress and exhaustion might be coming from raising children. Again, the stress and exhaustion of that is going to be largely unavoidable. For people like that, then yes, maybe prioritizing the things that you are most passionate about, that you care the most about getting done, prioritizing them into whichever end of your day you actually feel the most energetic is probably wise. But for the rest of us, I feel like it's probably not a good idea to end up with this really like elongated, overly complex morning routine and end up setting yourself into a situation where you feel stressed by the time you even start work. I haven't totally figured this out for myself quite yet. I still think that there are probably a few really important things to me that I do want to make time for in the morning, such as meditation and time at the altar, and probably contemplation of some kind on my spirituality or something that is otherwise igniting my passion at that time. And maybe it's just reading a book that I'm really enjoying, or writing some fiction if that's something that I'm really immersed in. And then also the other thing that I have been trying to make time for myself for in the morning and embed into a morning routine is paper planning, is taking out a diary every day, actually looking at the spread of the week, checking in with where I'm at in terms of the month and the quarter as well, and using that to set myself up for the day. Because I think that actually the most important thing for me anyway about a morning routine is you're signaling to yourself, and I know I've said this before on the channel, you're signaling to yourself what your priorities in life are, but you're also just setting up a mood. You're setting up a tone for the day. And I think that this needs to be a combination maybe of, maybe you do want to do something that feels meaningful, important to you, that you feel like, well, I've started off on the right foot and I am making time for this, and this is important to me, and maybe that is going to be your spiritual practice or meditation or something like that. But I think you also want to make a bit of time in the morning to actually feel the way that you're hoping to feel for the rest of the day, whether that is calm, collected, mindful. If you're managing to maintain a morning routine that is truly working for you, I think that it's actually going to put you into a mindset where you are going to do those things later in the day, where you are likely to take your lunch hour to go for a run, where you are likely to do exercise or do yoga in the evening, or catch up on your household chores immediately after work or before you go to bed. Like all of those things that you feel as though, well, I'm never going to get this done if I don't do it first thing in the morning. I think it's probably only true if you're in such a chaotic state of mind, and if you're pressurizing yourself so much that you just get to a point of fatigue and burnout really early on in your day, and a place where you can no longer motivate yourself to do anything. I'm going to draw this to a close. I feel like I could ramble about this for hours, but I have touched on my main points now, and I would really, really appreciate if you would let me know if this was helpful down in the comments below. I know that content like this isn't what I normally create on the channel, but I also know that some of you do find it helpful, that some of you are going through struggles like I am. If you find it helpful, please do give the video a thumbs up. It helps the algorithm, but also it really genuinely does let me know what you find helpful and enjoyable here on the channel. I have made decisions on video topics to drop and video topics to pick back up again in the future based on the ratio of likes to views. So that is very helpful information for me. Let me know your own journey with this in the comments as well. Are you also frustrated with this idea of the ubiquitous morning routine? Is it something that just has started to stress you out, or feel a bit like we've been lied to, maybe, that figuring out our entire life is not going to be based purely on the first half hour to 3 hours of our days? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, I hope that you're all doing well, and I will hope to be seeing you again here on the channel soon.